going to be talking about a little discussed subject, which is loneliness. And I know that we have many people in our communities that could be possibly suffering from this, but Roger and I were talking earlier that maybe because you live in a trilogy community, that is not the case, which is what we hope, is that your social connections are strong and that your friend group are really, really enhancing your lives. But for those of you who might be experiencing this, just please stay tuned. And for all of our trilogy members that are dialing in today or watching us in the club, keep in mind that if you weren't able to make it today, no problem. The team with Roger and Sarah are recording this today, and we will be posting it on MTL and sending it out in all of your newsletters coming up. So, Roger, without further ado, it's a minute after. So I wanted to take a moment and just introduce you and what a great partner you have been over the years for us. I'm trying to think, is this maybe year 4 or 5? I can't remember.
At least that, yes.
At least, if not more. But I first discovered Roger with this fabulous book that you are having an opportunity to look at now on the screen, which is Live Long and Die Short, which is what so many of us are hoping to do in our lives and not being burdened by not being healthy, but we want to get out and be invigorated. So, Roger, I'm going to turn it over to you. You have been a wonderful, wonderful partner in preventative medicine and just educating us all on how we can do more to live a longer, healthier, happier life.
Well, Sarah,
Roger, it's up to you.
Thank you. And right back at you, because we're learning, Sarah and I are learning from you and your folks also. And so this is mutually beneficial. So, well, welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. Loneliness, yes. This title, I think, probably gives you an indication as to why Sarah and I felt this was an important topic, because this is not just an emotion that someone can go through, and we all go through it at some time in our lives. And you may not be lonely now, but there's a good chance that in the future you are going to experience loneliness. But when it becomes more than just a day or two or whatever, it can indeed be a silent killer. And that's what I wanted to address today. That this is really a public health problem, and you will see others who have said that. And it's a very deadly threat to your healthy longevity. And so, I'm gonna pursue this again. This is not just an emotion that we're talking about. This is very much related to the topic we've talked about before: social connection. I would doubt that any of you would probably challenge the fact that social connection is very important. You made the decision to live in a trilogy community, and I'm sure part of that decision was the fact that you would stay connected to others and even grow your connections rather than what most people who stay in their homes, their previous homes, experience a decrease in their social connections. Excuse me, it's catchy there, Sarah. And so where you are, you have made a great decision to stay socially connected, but I want to encourage you to make sure that you take advantage of that for all the reasons that we're going to talk about. But once again, social connection is a very, very powerful predictor of a healthy longevity. And the lack of it is unfortunately a very powerful risk factor for all the big players. And we'll be talking about them relative to loneliness and dementia, cardiovascular disease, heart disease, and cancer, among other things. And so we will be talking many of the things that we've talked about before with social connection, you will hear again today. But the focus is loneliness, but it's just inextricably linked to social connection. So it is. There's been a long-term study. You may have been hearing about it in the news that Harvard has been doing a long-term study for over 85 years now. And they were focusing on many things, but happiness was one of them, and happiness related to a healthy life. And the single most powerful predictor of happiness in our lives and a healthy life with it is social connection, our relationships. Again, the single most important predictor of longevity and happiness. And I think that's what we're looking for. And inherent in this is the absence of loneliness, because again, it's our relationships that are key to experiencing this, that what they're seeing at this Harvard study. It's not it's not rocket science. It's not far-fetched. We all intuitively know that we feel better when we are connected to others. Now, life can be tough. People can be annoying, people can hurt us, and we can become defensive and self-isolate, so to speak. Bad idea, a very bad idea. And some people, because of trauma that they've had, just are anxious when they have to go out and meet others. And some people haven't developed the social skills necessary, and they're embarrassed. And again, these are all conditions that someone can indeed overcome as long as we do it in a rational way, which we'll talk about. But realizing all of that, we're still, as a very famous book says, we're better together. Again, we're going to talk about the fact that we don't always have to be with people, but we need to be with others, basically in our lives, feeling connected. It's not a surprise we feel this way. For eons, we were hunter gatherers or working in agriculture, and we would not have survived as a species. We were in a tough neighborhood, and we weren't the most powerful or the strongest creatures around. But the fact that when we banded together and worked together, we were awesome, so to speak. And this is why we basically dominate all of the other species, because of our ability to work together. And alone, not so much. In fact, if someone did something in a hunter-gatherer society that was not to the benefit of everyone, they could very well be exiled, to be alone, and most likely would not survive. And today we might be able to survive, but with an extremely low quality of life and a very high risk for some serious things happening to us. So no surprise that we should be connected. Now, loneliness. Loneliness does not mean alone only. Loneliness and being alone are two different things. So let's explore that. That's very important that we know that, because many of us enjoy being alone at times. I know I do. And with the world today, the frenetic world, the pace of the world, being alone can be enriching. And in fact, it very much is. And so you can see that being alone here, you can be content, you can be happy and calm, and still feel connected to others and to the world. It's a very spiritual thing, being alone under the circumstances that we know that we're still connected to others and we can go there, but we choose right now to be alone. Whereas loneliness, this is a feeling of emptiness and disconnection, a longing to be with others. And even though people may be around us, we still feel that we're not connected to them and that we are indeed isolated, sad, depressed. And this can follow us around for years. And so, again, I think most of you knew this, but being alone is not necessarily being lonely. But being lonely, it doesn't necessarily that mean that you're not around others, but it's a matter of being connected to others. That's the key. So here we are. You can be alone, and it can be enriching, and we can choose to do it. And it's a very spiritual thing and enriching. And yet we can also be surrounded by people, and yet feel incredibly isolated, alone, depressed, sad, and again, not in a good place. Now, this is not just an older adult thing. This is not thing just later in life. There tend to be more risk factors for being isolated as we get older, but it doesn't mean that it's just for older adults. Look at this. Look at this data. Most people find this extremely surprising. These are the age groups and the percent that report feeling often or very often feeling lonely. starting at the 16 to 24 range and to the over 75. And there you go, over 75, you're less likely than all the other age groups. This was quite surprising, and in fact, it goes along with others research and other surveys that are out there that indeed younger people today are stressed. They're feeling alone and lonely, and we're actually seeing higher levels of many diseases that in previous generations were pretty much experienced only by those who are older. And now we're seeing cancer, for instance, in rising in the 40 and 50 age group. And the researchers and medical people are trying to determine exactly what that is. We feel there's many factors. They feel stress, the environment, food source, all of these things are potential factors, but we don't know. But in any case, this isn't something that's just isolated, to use that word, in the older age group. In fact, I think I've said before, when they did a survey, who is the happiest decade of life? And it turns out that it's the 70s. Again, that was a huge surprise for the researchers, thinking younger people would be much happier, and yet in the 70s that they find that they are the most satisfied with life and the happiest, which is good to hear. So there are risk factors.
Roger,
Yes.
I have a quick question for you.
Yes, please.
When you go back to the prior slide,
Yes.
do you feel like that group that are the most feeling lonely, could that be a result of technology?
I believe that it is a major factor, Sarah. I'm going to go into that because the researchers are finding that is probably exactly what's going on. The
Gotcha.
fact that they're probably the most connected relative to technology generations, and yet the most lonely and feeling isolated, even though they're most connected. So you're right on track, Sarah, as usual. Thank you.
All right.
So so here we are. These are risk factors for loneliness. So any of these things, and there are more, but there's not just a few. There's a wide variety of life events, life situations, and feelings and experiences that can lead to loneliness. And we're all susceptible to all of these things. And so loneliness is not just something that is a defect, a disease. It is the potentially normal occurrence for many of the things that can happen. But whether we bounce back, whether we recognize it as what it is, loneliness, and something that is not just a passing thing for us, and therefore we need to do something about it, or indeed we will be at high risk for disease and for impairment and for a lower quality of life. Many risk factors. And here's some more. These are called causes of loneliness: isolation, life transitions, and certainly mental health conditions and physical health conditions. And there's the technology, excessive use of technology as a main cause of loneliness. See, Sarah was looking at the slides. She wasn't. She didn't get to see them, but thank you. So personal values and beliefs. We've talked about mindset in the past, how you can have a closed mindset, and you tend to be closed-minded about different forms of living, different cultures, different races, different behaviors, and become a judge and feel that there's only one way to live. And there's 8 billion people, and theoretically there can be 8 billion different ways to live your life, and therefore it's ridiculous to close off. And when someone is intolerant, that isolates you. From a huge point. Say it's as if, say, I didn't like women, say to speak, and I didn't want to deal with women at all. That would be like over half the population that I'd be isolating myself from, and not necessarily aggrandizing myself to the males. So these kind of personal values and beliefs can be a problem for us also. So, and then there's this, which Sarah was alluding to. This increased connection that the younger generation have and the older generation is becoming a barrier to true connection. I know you're all nodding because I'm out there speaking with people, and those of us and my peers and those who are even younger than I are all extremely concerned for their children, their grandchildren, and their ability to connect with others on a personal level, with social skills, with conversation, to fully appreciate someone, to be present with someone rather than being present with technology. That is a worrisome thing for we older people, and I think for good reason. And I do believe, as I said with Sarah, that this I believe is a major factor, a major risk factor for isolation and for loneliness. So, skipped over this. Sherry Turkle is a magnificent professor at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and author. And she has written this book some time ago, Alone Together. And you can see there the subset, why we expect more from technology and less from each other. But basically, that's saying that that's where we're paying attention. We're paying attention to technology and not to other people as people. They're friends on technology. We trade text with them or on other social media things, and yet we don't connect with them in the ways that our species has connected with others from the time we began for eons on a personal level. Problematic. It doesn't mean technology is not going to go away. So it's a matter of understanding this. And I think as older adults, I think because we have grown up when a time in our lives was not with technology as we know it today, that I feel we have a responsibility to tell that story to younger people and to facilitate real connection, like if even if it's just a meal where everyone sits down and talks. And because when we do that, something resonates, our DNA vibrates, I think, and we feel good about that. Feel much better than looking at a screen, connecting with someone. Even videos probably are a little better, but that's not vibrating our DNA the way that it has come to be over eons. That's who we are. Remember, I've told you that technology has changed radically just within the last few hundred years, and yet we, as a species, have been away for eons. And yeah, give us another maybe 500,000 million years, and we'll catch up. And yeah, maybe technology would be the way we interact, but we're not going to be around for that. So the risk of isolation, I think we've talked about it. It is deadly. It is not just an emotion. It is something that we should pay attention to personally, and when it is in others. Certainly, I know Trilogy pays attention to that when they see it in residence, and when they maybe haven't seen people or see people out connecting with others. And that's not in a paternalistic way. That's in a humanistic way where we care about these people and know that although some people profess that they want to be alone, that people are annoying and they hurt, as I've said before. And that is true, and that can be a problem. But the fact is, as Sherry Turkle's other book was Better Together, we are definitely better together. We absolutely need that connection for social support, but also for emotional support. And so, what happens? I've alluded to this. These diseases follow loneliness. They are very much at higher levels, higher prevalence and incidence in people who are lonely or not socially connected. Anywhere from 2 to 5 times more likely to get heart disease, dementia, depression, also cancer, because that loneliness affects our immune system. Loneliness affects our cognitive abilities, and therefore it makes it more likely that dementia or some other kind of a condition that affects our ability for our brain to function normally much more likely. So these are things that, again, loneliness is not just something that happens and it is emotion. It is something that can happen to everyone, but it's important that we do something about it and we recognize it for the threat that it is. The Surgeon General felt that this was important enough that they did a very long study and in 2023 released this report and called it an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. This was very surprising. You know, they've talked about heart disease and cancer and things, but to do something with loneliness, my goodness, what's going on here? So the takeaways from that report are right here, but there's more, and I'm going to go through it all. But that humans are wired for social connection, okay? And but we've become more isolated over time. It is a cultural thing for us. Not all cultures are experiencing it, but certainly ours is. And because of the pace of life, because of extended families usually are not together the way they were before, and we're kind of all over the place. But again, we're wired for social connection, and yet we're going in the opposite direction. Social connection, we've talked about, improves health and well-being for all. And social connection is vital to a community health and success and organizational health. And without that, we're disjointed and we can't come together. Quotes for the greater good being all of us. And we tend to focus more upon myself, and of course it's important we do that, but in the context of being socially connected and in a social society requires us to think of others and as not just ourselves, and it's to the benefit of all. And together, it is possible to advance social connection and improve our nation's public health. A little bit more on that coming up. So here are 5 things you need to know from the Surgeon General's report. You're going to get, what was the little thing for novels that we used to read in school, the crib notes or something like that. Anyway, for loneliness and isolation are public health issues. You've heard me say that already. They're not personal failings. Happens to everyone. Loneliness and isolation have severe, severe physical consequences, not just mental, but also physical. And it's the equivalent, if you're lonely and chronically lonely or chronically not socially connected, it's the equivalent of smoking a half pack of cigarettes a day. Sometimes it's necessary to actually have a comparison like that to appreciate it. The epidemic is not new. It didn't just come with COVID, but COVID made it worse. But it had been going on for a long time since the Industrial Revolution, I think, when our society radically changed from one where we significantly depended upon each other and we were hunter-gatherers or we were agricultural. But again, it is not new, and COVID did not just cause it, it did make it more in your face, so to speak. We all experienced some loneliness, I believe, during COVID, but we're recovering. But what we experience should be a warning light for us that this is possible if I live a long life, and I hope we all do, and longevity is more common. But if we're going to be healthy during that longevity, it's important that we be connected to others and stay connected. And this report compares the need to address loneliness as a public health problem, like we did with tobacco and obesity, addiction, all the others, because these are public health problems that threaten our health and our well-being and that of our communities. And so the Surgeon General felt that this is important enough that it should be treated that way. And we talked about the many risk factors, and they do vary. And you've seen a list of them. It can be almost anything. And sometimes something happens and triggers something that may have happened in childhood that that can cause a depression or can cause mental health disturbance, and we become isolated from that. So it can be almost anything. And combating loneliness requires a communal effort. It's the individual can do something about it, but it's not ironic the fact that we do need others and work with others and help sometimes in order to combat loneliness. And that is not only help with loneliness, but it is part of solving the problem, namely that you're connected to others. A therapist, for instance, for depression, that helps. Even if the therapist was, say, not even qualified to help, but just speaking about your what's troubling you with another human being is helpful. I know you've all experienced that. We do it with friends. So we've talked about healthy longevity, and when isolation and loneliness is a factor, you're much more likely to see the shaded curve rather than the dotted line there. Or when something happens, the little dip, that we don't recover the way this graph shows, but we begin the descent like the shaded area. And we've talked about this. This is not only a lower quality of life, it is also a significant burden in medical costs and productivity in a society. And because of that, several countries have addressed it. The United Kingdom, there is a minister of loneliness in the United Kingdom. They have socialized medicine and they have national health care, and they follow this with data that loneliness tends to be associated with much more significant illness, cost of significant illness, the price tag, as well as the personal cost. And so they feel that's important. Japan has done the same thing. And other countries, although they may not have named someone in government to deal with this, they have put it up there as a focus, as Australia has, and they don't have a dedicated minister of loneliness, but they've implemented national initiatives to reduce social isolation as a nation, and within smaller communities. And New Zealand has done the same thing. And Canada, Ireland, they also have recognized that loneliness has become a significant problem and have initiatives there to do it. It's a financial thing for them, of course, but it's more than that. It's about productivity and just good quality of life, being able to live in a country where you can live your best life and throughout your lifespan. So the report from the Surgeon General is what can we do? So, okay, we know that it's serious. We know that we should do something about it. And what do we? So the first thing is to prioritize social connections for yourself. We can prioritize many things. Some things are more important than others when we're younger. It may be developing competence, education. When we're a young family member, it's about your family and your children, and there's our work. But we can continue to do those things, say we're younger and still in that area, but we also should make sure that we're paying attention to our social connections. The old story of the work, or the woman or the man who works so much they hardly have time for their families, and the social connection that comes from that. This is basically what we're addressing here. This is something that should be up there, like eating, maybe exercising, or just moving, all the things that we talk about for a healthy longevity. But it should be up there. And it's face to face, really. Certainly, social media is great. And we saw during COVID, social media saved many of us, particularly video conferencing. When we couldn't be with others, it was a stopgap measure, but it is just that. It falls short of what we need to thrive. So reach out to those friends, stay connected to them. So the second thing is to reach out for help. And we've talked about that. This is not something you have to just barrel through alone or be embarrassed about. This happens to everyone, and you reach out. It could be just a friend. It could be just talking about it. It could be a therapist. It could be a physician, whatever. But do not fail to address it when it becomes something that more than just a very short-term thing. So this is more for an organization, and I know Trilogy is attentive to this, but any group that you're with, it should make sure that it allows people to connect to one another as a whole person. as not just the skill they have or the particular thing they bring to the organization or the company or whatever, but that as a whole person and that they can connect. And so, many companies have this. They have parties, they have trips that they go on. They do something out of the office and away from the thing that brings them together in the first place to produce or to work on a particular thing. So that this is more for an organization, but any group that you're in should keep this in mind. Advocate for it in your community. If it's not there and you see people who are lonely, I don't think you'll see it in Trilogy, but if you did, I mean, it's about advocating for changes so that people don't get lost, that those who may be afraid or haven't been out of their houses, or you hardly ever see them, and you don't want to intrude, but in a very low key way. Could we have coffee, or what do we have in common, and just talk about that and reach out, but also advocate within the community so that the culture of the community is one that is more likely to engage everyone. And you're learning some things, I hope, from all of this, and or what you've learned in life. And we hope that you share that, perhaps with those younger generations who don't recognize this as a public health or a serious threat to their healthy longevity. They just feel it's just an emotion that they're feeling, and not treating it as a risk factor, say like chest pain or shortness of breath or a rash or whatever, and treat it as a symptom of something that is going on that needs to be addressed. I love this one, and it's that we talked about this and showed this slide when we talked about social connection. But once again, it's something that goes there. Here it is as an African proverb. Certainly, our ancestors knew, probably more so than we do, that the connection, be it family or be it a group, whatever, that is absolutely critical to get where you're going, namely for healthy longevity. This is just, so, oh, that's nice. Yeah, but it is, animals are mammals and they have emotions, and the mammals do in particular. And that's why we call it a mammalian brain, a limbic system. That's where emotions, at least the core emotions are. And so they feel these things. And so what I'm saying is that this is so deeply rooted in who we are as humans. That it is, and it is around us in many mammalian cultures, but the fact is, it is core to who we are. You've heard this one. I love showing this slide, and it's so important, the relationships we have with others, and to make sure that we get out, and that this loneliness is not something that can sort of eat us from within and do the damage that perhaps we've thought we've eaten well, or we exercise, or we do this and this, and yet when we're hit with something as loneliness, which is just as threatening as the side effects of not doing those other things, or even like smoking, it is something that we should pay attention to. So here's another 5 ways to beat loneliness. Okay, so when you're with someone, we tend not always to be with the person. We're maybe thinking about the next thing we're going to say within the conversation. We may be thinking of something else. We may be looking at them but not there at all, not present with them. And this is not connection. This is not social connection. This very easily leads to eventual loneliness because you don't have an appreciation for what that connection can be when you are present with someone, when you hear them, when you're a better listener. So this is what I would encourage you to be: a better listener. That is maybe a more concrete way to say be present with others. In aviation, we used to say, be more on the receive end than the transmit end. So there you go. People suffer. You suffer. Everyone has trauma in their life, and we can say we're sorry, but true compassion is linked to empathy. Empathy is actually feeling something, and then the compassion comes with sort of acting on that and sharing your acknowledgement of it and your support. We have, as you heard before, things called mirror neurons. So when we're with someone who is suffering, when we do brain scans, functional MRIs, we can see that the areas of the brain in both the person who is suffering and the one who is with them are firing together, the same areas. These are called mirror neurons. And so this is basic to who we are, but sometimes we're just not paying attention, or we're busy, or we don't know what to do and say. But you just heard Teresa Beshwaite talk to you about grieving, and I'm sure she said, because I've heard her say it before, what do I do when someone is suffering and grieving? It's just be there. You don't have to say cliches. You don't have to, try to rock their world, divert them, or say it will pass, or all of that. It's just being there, and it may not even involve any language. And that is true compassion and true empathy. Great. Let's advance the slide here. That sometimes they don't want to go. Right. There we go. We are all disappointed by other humans, and we disappoint other humans. Like I said, sometimes we can be annoying to each other. And when we forgive, when even though we're hurt, when we can forgive, this is a really true form of connecting with another person. And someone could even say it's selfish to forgive, because the person who forgives gets much more benefit than the one who is forgiven. Certainly, the forgiven feels better, but the person who forgives is significantly enhanced and enriched by the connection that's there. Nelson Mandela, you know the story, 26 years in prison, and when he was finally out, he was able to forgive, and even when he became president of South Africa, he didn't take any revenge, because he knew it was better for the country to come together, better to get rid of apartheid. If indeed he didn't react, that would have just continued the apartheid in the reverse. And so for the betterment of the culture and everyone who lived in the country, he knew he had to forgive. I'm sure that was not easy. You've heard me say this so many times: give up the need to be right. Basically what that is. And I've told you, a woman came up to me and she says, well, what if you are right? Well, I think that's the point. This is more about not requiring others to be wrong. In other words, we don't have to browbeat them, say, your opinion is wrong. Remember, have a growth mindset where you can at least be tolerant. Listen. And the words, you may be right. You're not saying you are right or anything, but at least you allow the person to have their view. I'm sure if you really look back, you probably have never, or maybe once or twice, changed someone's mind with an argument. So it's much better to listen. And sometimes there are some people who these days, with the great division in our society, have reached out to tell me why you feel that way, why you believe that. And again, you may not believe it, but it's better to hear it. And everyone is just trying to do their best. They're trying to get through the night, so to speak. And when we become Judge Judy, when we judge people for their opinions, that's not good. And that further isolates us from that group, but others also, because it's easily seen that you're not a particularly tolerant person. And so therefore, many people would be a little uncomfortable around you, that you may find something in them that they don't tolerate, and therefore sort of close the door to your relationship. So it's a matter of, again, 8 billion people in the world, and theoretically you're going to have 8 billion ways to go through life. And it's a whole lot better, since we need each other, to just not judge and allow that person to believe what they believe, and go on and find something that you're together on, and sort of build on that. Not easy, but I'll tell you, it is an elixir for success in social relationships. You'll be a rock star. If there's one thing to do to make sure that you're not lonely, there it is, right there. When we do this, we connect with others. We feel good about being human. We feel part of humanity, and we feel part of the planet and with other living things, creatures, trees, anything, our planet. Volunteering is associated with a much lower risk of dementia, heart disease, all the other things that we have seen that social connection does. Same thing. It reduces the risk for those things. People are happier. They have a purpose in life. All the things that we talk about with healthy longevity. So, I mean, you don't have to go to Africa and commit to a year or a month. Just helping out somewhere. Just something small can mean so much. The Dalai Lama says it's our main purpose in life is to help others. And if you can't help them, at least don't hurt them. And when we reach out to someone, and this is so powerful. Ralph Waldo Emerson said this. Just one life has breathed easier because of you, because you live. This is success. And so by success, in our terms, it is a complete life. It is being connected to others. It is being content, happy, and with a healthy longevity. So here's sort of a summary of things, a little hard to read, but some things that you should consider doing. Okay, we've already talked about some of them, but again, this is just a summary. So talk with friends or relatives, in person or on the phone. And I know that you and I, as a peer of you, we tend to do more of that, but we're also being pulled by the technology thing that is driving us from this particular way of communicating. Make sure that it is not a casualty of your growing, which is important to grow and learn how to use technology, or else you can be functionally illiterate. But don't let social connection be a casualty of that with the resulting loneliness. Say yes to invitations, with friends or family. Yeah, sometimes you really don't want to, and you kind of want to keep your feet up on the ottoman or watch the game or whatever. And that's okay. But occasionally sort of push yourself saying, I should get out there. And very rarely are you disappointed by that. It happens, but very rarely are. And you usually come home feeling enriched. Volunteer, there it is. Anything, anything. It can be big, small, anything. And even working with a hobby is something that can help with loneliness, because when you do that, you tend to be mindful, and when you're mindful, you feel part of the planet. You feel part of being of the species and of being human. And it is a beautiful place, being mindful, because you've heard me say that I think it's key to a happy life, being mindful. So wherever you are, be there. I hope it's with someone, but being alone is okay. That's a spiritual thing. But make sure that part of your life is with others and being there with them, not just physically present, but connected to them. And remember, Kaizen, small steps to big changes. So whatever changes you want to make in this area, make sure you do it in small steps. That's how you succeed with the change, and that's how the change is durable. It doesn't go away after a short time. So I am going to end it there, and I'm ready for any questions that may be out there.
Well, excuse me, Dr. Landry, you and I both have the coughs today. So
Yes.
One of the things that I hear quite often is for people who are looking to move into our communities. Once they actually move and come in, they're like, why didn't I do this sooner?
Absolutely.
And I think that is 100% due to social connection, and it invigorates them to, again, maybe volunteer, maybe reach out and make new friends, whatever that looks like. But I hear that all the time.
I am not surprised, Sarah. I totally agree. Sarah, my colleague, and we've been in one way or another probably associated with maybe 140 senior living communities. And consistently we hear that. And consistently we don't hear this was a mistake. What we
Mhm.
hear, I should have done this earlier because it allows you to be connected and thrive. Whereas waiting a little longer, you may be fighting some physical or mental impairments
Mhm.
that doesn't allow you to fully the full benefit of being there. But you're absolutely
Yeah.
right.
Hear it all the time.
Again, I'm not surprised, and congratulations. I'm glad you do, but I'm not. Again, I'm not surprised at all. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sarah, I'm not seeing any Q&A today, so I guess I wanted to remind the members who are currently on virtual or in a club, if you have any questions, be sure and drop that question in the chat so that we can make sure that while Dr. Landry is with us, that we are answering those questions for you.
Yes,
And,
please.
and if the question pops up later, after we're over with, just get it to Sarah and she'll get it to me.
Mhm.
We'll get an answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And another thing that I might ask our members to do is if there are subjects that they might be interested in learning more about or tackling, be sure and shoot that off as well. Either through the chat or everybody, I think, has my email address. If not, go to feedback@bluestar.com and we'd be happy to entertain those ideas for the future.
Yeah, say volunteer. How can you more easily volunteer? An idea about that, or what we might do for my neighbor who hardly ever comes out.
Mhm.
And you don't want to intrude, but you want to nudge a little bit because of who we are as humans. Most people, no matter how damaged they might be, feel better after they have had a connection to someone else.
We do
Yep.
have a question, Dr. Landry, from Todd. Todd, and I think you were maybe alluding to this a little just now. What's the best way to reach out to someone you feel is suffering from loneliness?
Exactly, it's exactly what we were talking. So you might there may be someone who knows them within the community and knows their history and what might have been something that was important to them. But for gardening, say, and now they're not doing it or something. If you can, that's great. If you cannot, something very low key, a single person, not a group, little knock on the door, and say, we just have coffee every now and then, and be please come, really low key, and see what happens. And but the important thing is that it not be threatening and it not be overwhelming, and that it's truly inviting and coming across as a true invitation. Oh, or you may have know something about them. I heard that, you grew up in New England. What was that like? Just asking a question sometime, maybe if you just meet them. So these little hooks, so to speak, in a good way, to get them to talk about themselves, to get them to talk about something that's important to them, something that you may have in common. All of these things can resonate and begin the process, which can take a while for some people.
Mhm.
Some people have been through the ringer sometimes. And it may be grieving. And Teresa talked about grieving. And if you didn't hear her, I encourage you to get the recording and hear it, because she can talk about someone who may be lonely and isolated because they're grieving. And that can be a long process, and we have to respect that process, but we can also help with that process with just as someone just knowing that we're there for them.
Absolutely. I'm very, very blessed to have an elderly neighbor that lives across the street from me. He's in his 90s, and I've watched his health slowly deteriorate. But what I do is I mark my calendar every Sunday and I make sure that I go knock on the door, take whether it's a glass of lemonade, something I just made, even hummingbird food sometimes. I'm like, hey, I saw your hummingbird food. is empty. Let me replace it for you. But doing anything that you can makes them feel seen, which I think is so important.
That's well said, Sarah. Absolutely. That they're
Yeah.
seen, that they're acknowledged, that they're not just a blot out there or someone who doesn't matter.
Yep.
I don't know if you know anything about this, Dr. Landry, if you can speak to it. I'm wondering about if there's any statistics or data on there about, if loneliness occurs more in men or women. And I say that because I know working in senior living, the women tended to be more social, our background as hunter-gatherers, but also it was always something we were working on, was to figure out how to get the men more engaged. Now there's always fewer of them in senior living because women live longer. But just any thoughts that either one, and I wonder if you experienced that too, Sarah, of a struggle to figure out what the men want. They don't always want these big groups, they want smaller things with fewer people, or I don't know. I can't say that I feel like we ever found the answer.
You're right, and your observations are absolutely right. I believe that women do live longer. There are several reasons. In medical school, we said it was the effect of estrogen, but what I believe is really going on is that women tend to be, as women, but as their gender, more connected to each other, willing to talk about things, connect with others, whereas men, certainly in my peer group and a couple generations after, not so much today, and that's a good thing, were raised, almost to be lone wolves, so to speak. That was being masculine. You didn't have to bother someone with what you might be feeling. Something that men really wouldn't talk about, and that's a whole generation. And I'm sure most of your residents are nodding. I mean, that's how we were raised, and yeah, it was associated with masculinity, but the fact is, it is not associated with masculinity. It's not associated with a gender. It's how we chose to see men during the 100 years ago and even before, but today, and it is changing, that men have the same need to connect. However, you did mention that how they want to connect is different. And my wife will say, so you were with your buddies from college, so how are their wives? How are their kids? How is everybody? And I said, I don't know. We don't talk about that. and that's okay. That's just the way it is. But it's a very successful time that we spent together. It's what can I say? We're a different breed of cat, both of us, men and women. And I think relative to this issue, women get it right, and therefore live longer. And I think a woman who loses her spouse and is older, I think that when she does get lonely or isolated, I think she feels it much more powerfully than a man would. And a man is lonely, but he's more than likely not going to complain about it in certain generations. But again, I think I see young men today as much more open to things that previous generations weren't. And so we're evolving.
Makes sense.
And I think one thing that we have totally noticed in our communities as well, to your point, Dr. Landry, is we do things like once a month men's breakfast, because again, we have been witness to the fact that many of them are not into these large groups, but put 20 or 30 of them together and they all go out for coffee and have a breakfast at Sally's joint or whatever it is. And then it becomes a ritual that they look forward to, which I think is another way to help overcome some of that loneliness that might be out there.
It is. it is when you approach it that way, it is acceptable in the way they were raised. That's okay for a man to do that. It's not weak.
Mhm.
It's not being a needy person.
Right.
It is just being a guy and being connected the
Yep.
way he was when he was younger, when he played team sports or when he was in the
Absolutely.
military. And I mean, the connection I had in the military, I mean, it was because it was solidified with, challenge and really difficult times. And that was powerful, and it still is powerful to me. And I still meet with many of those people because we experience something very intense together, and so that's very important. So it is there. The need is there. It's just that was a set of unwritten rules that came
Yep.
over the last century relative to men that most men still respect, and
Right.
and it guides their behavior. But they, as I said, they want to be connected to others.
They do. It's funny. My phone is blowing up, so I apologize for keep looking down at my phone. But one of our lifestyle folks that asked the question. So Todd is our lifestyle manager up at Verterra, which is a brand new community that's just really picking up some traction. And one of the things that he sent me a note about is something that we started that's called a porch drop. Air quotes, which is just as people are moving in, making them feel welcome with some kind of a small token of appreciation. Or we could also turn that around a little bit and say, if someone does lose a spouse and we find out about it, we could also just send them a note or drop something off that says, just thinking about you today, or use some of Teresa's language that we might be able to help them feel like they are, again, being seen versus ignored.
Well, I think that's powerful. That's excellent. And you made me think, Sarah, remember you and I, when we were with communities, frequently we would talk to the salespeople and we would say, do you ask when people come to investigate your community and whether they should live there, do you ask them, what do you think you could do for the community that would make it better? And that's being seen. That's being evaluated. Yes, you want to be, I don't want to say pampered. You want to have a nice life and not be pushed and everything. But to have a purpose and to feel seen and that you have a skill, I think that's very powerful. So you're right along those lines with what you were doing there, the porch drop.
Yeah, I love it.
Yes. Awesome.
Well, Sarah, I don't think we have any more, do we? Any more questions?
Not that I see. We have a nice comment from Doris about how she engages her neighbor by having her taste her food for her opinion, and through that process, she brings some purpose and some socializing. Lots of people commenting on the creativity of that as a way to connect, and also
that's beautiful. Thank you, Doris. That's
like they have purpose. Yeah.
That's excellent.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that, as you just said, Sarah, there are creative ways to do this that will vary with the individual that you're in and the culture that you're in, and so. But think about it. How you might, in a very small way, begin the bonds. There's a saying: you can't make old friends, but you can make new friends. And no matter what your age, and so.
We do have a few other comments. I don't know why they weren't showing up for me. Shirley is asking, how do you find volunteer opportunities?
Sarah, do you have a way within Trilogy for that?
We do. And so, Shirley, one of the things that you can do, I'm not sure which community that you live in, but reach out to someone, especially your lifestyle person in your community, and they should be able to connect you with other volunteer opportunities. This is one of the cultural things that we are really shifting to in our new communities, to say we should be providing you some opportunities every single month where you can get out and volunteer, Or we have groups like the SPCA, I think is coming into our new Bigford location to do a presentation on kind of like what they do in case we can tug on somebody's heartstrings and help them find a purpose.
Excellent. You know, the not-for-profits are going to be struggling in the future. Just it's just the climate right now, and so they probably need volunteers more than ever. Many communities and have volunteer fairs where representatives will come, and so you can look for those. You have certain skills. So look for places that potentially could use those skills. Someone may have been a teacher, and maybe a school or a library would like a reader or something like that. So those are ways to do it. They're more than you can believe, the need for volunteers, but it is unfortunate that it's not always an easy road to get into. But once you're in there, you know, you get carried along like a raging river because more opportunities come, you know, and it's a wonderful thing.
Couple more comments real quick. Bill says, is it unusual for a person that is married and with all children out of the house to feel lonely?
Oh, no, not unusual at all. You know, a whole life of being a father and raising kids, you know, and then maybe grandkids, and that doesn't go away. That's a very rewarding thing, and most men, that was a major purpose in their lives, and so that purpose is quotes gone, but don't believe it is, you know, because the wisdom of older adults, we've talked about this, although it doesn't seem to be valued in our society, it still is. And so the ability for family or for other young people to share your stories or your wisdom, that is a way to stay connected. But you know, it's look for other possibilities of what we've been talking about. But no, it is not unusual at all to feel. I think if it's lonely, but I think it's more along the lines of not having a purpose. And so look at it that way, and look for your purpose, which is always changing. It changes with our circumstances in life.
Barbara also is asking, how do you handle an angry response from your attempt to reach out, assuming reaching out to someone who you think might be lonely and they respond with anger?
Well, internally, you can feel very sorry for them, but some people have been really hurt severely, and it has become their way of navigating the world to be isolated, and that's not a good way. So I would, if someone is angry, say I would apologize and say I respect how you feel. I was only trying to be helpful and only trying to get to know you better. You know, if you're ever ready, fine, I'll be ready, but you know, I won't intrude.
Yep.
Don't judge them. You know, you don't, you know, you haven't walked in their shoes. You don't know how they got to this place, because this is not a normal in the sense of healthy way to look at the world. And so some trauma has obviously been there. And so it's not for us to judge and say, oh, well, isn't she a miserable SOB? And it's well, hasn't she been hurt badly? And so it may take some time. I hope she comes around, but as long as she knows we're there if she wants to connect, even in some small way.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for this opportunity once again. Thank you all for joining, and I certainly enjoy this, and I consider this, you know, sort of like my little trilogy home. You know, I get to talk to everybody, and I know Sarah does too. So
absolutely, always happy to be here.